right. Hello, and thank
Hello.
you for meeting with me. My name is Jenny Bryan, and I'm a doctoral student in the Higher Education Leadership Program at East Tennessee State. I'm interested in learning more about the relationship between doctoral student support systems and their perceived stress levels. So, all of my questions will relate to those topics in some way. I'm genuinely interested in hearing your authentic thoughts and your experiences. So please know that I am not seeking certain responses and I won't consider any inappropriate. I would expect our discussion to last approximately 30 minutes, but it may take longer if you intend to divulge more than I expect. Um, I want to be sure that I've heard and understood all of your statements accurately. So for this reason, if it's okay with you, I would like to record our video and audio record our session today. Please be assured that our discussion will be kept confidential and will only be shared in the context of my qualitative research course with other doctoral students and our professor. So here's the informed consent. If you would like to sign that.
Thank you.
Please return and then we'll go get started. Note that you do have the right to opt out of answering any question that makes you uncomfortable or even ending the conversation if at some point you need to.
Okay.
Can I answer any questions for you before we get started?
I don't think so.
All right. For the record, please, will you tell me about yourself and why you chose to enter the doctoral program at East Tennessee State?
Sure. My name is Megan Wifley. I'm the Assistant Director of Student Programming at Middle Tennessee State University. I've been here for 5.5 years. Prior to that, I worked in housing as their student programs coordinator. Prior to that, I'd worked at a small private college in Illinois. I had gotten my master's degree before that, so I was kind of hoping to get some more professional development in continuing on with my classes. I had spent some time looking at the EDS program, and we also have an EDD program here, but it's K through 12. And with the rigors of that program, my supervisor was not able to let me have the time that I would need in order to pursue that. And so I really put that on the back burner until you suggested that we go through the EDD program together and found this all completely online cohort. So I thought that that would really work out well for me with the rigors of my job.
So, can you tell us, in your own words, how you define stress, and tell me for you what your typical stress reactions look like?
Sure. I think for me, stress is undue pressures put on me by my current position, my supervisor, my home life, myself, and just really extra pressure to do well. And I mean, not even to do the best, but to do well, or to be somewhere, do something, and always having somebody else need something from me. Unfortunately for me, I internalize a lot of my stressors rather than externalize them. I get quiet. I get cranky, as a lot of people do. Unfortunately, having previous issues with eating disorders, I tend to not eat. I tend to overeat. I tend to purposely miss meals because I do feel kind of that upset stomach feeling. So I do internalize a lot of my stress.
Okay. All right. You mentioned the sort of behaviors that you engage in when you're under stress. Do you find that there's any difference in the behaviors that you engage in if the stress is physical versus emotional?
I think definitely emotional is probably I overeat. Physical, if I'm doing too much in a hurry, those types of things, that's where I will not eat. I do find myself, I have a very hard time sleeping, and a lot of times it's mostly emotional. I never can shut off my brain, and so I don't go to sleep well, or I wake up in the middle of the night and I am constantly, and I am one of those kinds of people, at the moment I wake up, I am going.
Yeah.
And so I think for the most part, I do have a little bit more of a tendency to have emotional stressors as compared to physical stressors.
Okay. So as I mentioned, I'm interested in talking about support systems. And so when I think of a support system, I consider it an individual person or a network of people who offer practical and emotional assistance in some way. But how would you define it?
Yeah, I think, and just like you said, it's either a person or a group of people who are really there for you. Somebody you can bounce ideas off of. Somebody who, if you don't know something, you can say, "Hey, I had this in my assignment. What does this mean to you?" And really just the people who are willing to leave you alone, let you
Mhm.
get your homework done, or give you an extra 5 or 10 minutes, and really are proud of you and supportive of you when you do well, sort of those cheerleaders when you're not doing so well, and kind of just that person or people to get you through.
Right. Okay. So many people believe that having a strong support system can reduce one's perceived stress levels. What are your thoughts on this concept?
I agree. I think it's really important for people to have somebody, whether it's a person or a group of people, that they can talk to about things personally, about things they can talk to professionally. For those of us in the doctoral program, some of that's both.
Mhm. Okay, so if you'll describe your perceived stress level in relation to your participation in the doctoral program, and specifically what things are most stressful to you about the participation in the program.
Sure. This is my first time having completely online programs. I have been out of my master's degree long enough. We almost didn't have the internet back then.
I know.
I had one online class, and then I had one hybrid class back when I had my master's degree. And so I think one of the stressors is that time management skill that you need to have for yourself. You need to be able and willing to log in, to do the homework, to do the reading. Sometimes the reading is so overwhelming because of the amount of reading we have to do. Um, but having it online is a stressor because nobody's there harping on you.
Right.
You don't have to have it done by 5 o'clock because that's what time you step foot in class. It can be done at 2 o'clock in the morning for all your professor cares, as long as it's done on time. And so I think sometimes the online format is a little bit of a stressor. I think not knowing your cohort mates is sometimes a little bit of a stressor.
Mm.
If you say something, is it going to be taken wrong? If you say something, are they going to misconstrue what you say, especially in the online format where you're typing as compared to the face-to-face? That's a little bit of a stressor as well. And not only not knowing your cohort mates, but not knowing your professors,
Right.
and not having that ability to walk up to them and say, Professor so-and-so, Dr. so-and-so, I wasn't quite understanding what this chapter meant. Could you explain it to me? Sometimes it's a lot of Googling what
Right.
answers mean, and sometimes it's a lot of just kind of asking around what something meant.
Right. Agreed. Okay. So if you can tell me about your family in the context of your support system, would you say that your family reduces your stress, increases your stress, or do they do both at various times?
I have a very small family. It is just me and my mother anymore, and unfortunately, she is in an assisted living. So she is here in town. Previously to this, she was elsewhere, and so I did move her to town. And while she is a great cheerleader for me, I do feel the need to be with her. I'm with her before work, after work. If I have to work late, she's calling me. Where are you? When are you coming over? Those types of things. I do oftentimes sit at her place with my homework, working on things while she's watching TV, just so she feels my presence. But she is one of my biggest cheerleaders. So when I do well on an assignment, or I tell her about any of the discussions we've had or any of the papers I've written, she's a great cheerleader for me. So in that regard, she's both a stressor and a support system. We've just kind of gotten used to how it is, so it's not too bad. We'll see how it comes when it comes to dissertation time.
Right. All right. So if you'll describe your relationships with your supervisor, and how that affects your stress level related to the doctoral program, would you identify that individual as a support system, or why or not?
This is also a very dichotomous relationship. I think deep down he does try to be supportive. He has agreed to pay for the one class at a time, or sign the waiver for the one class at a time. He has been very willing to, if I get my work done, he lets me read, the articles I need to read. As he and I have that conversation, and as long as I get done what I need to get done, he's very willing to let me, do any type of classwork I might need when it comes to during my workday, because I do work a lot of hours. I work a lot of late nights and weekends. And the majority of my work is student focused, and so if students aren't around, summer, Christmas break, things like that, I do have a lot of downtime during the day as compared to where I might have to be working a night or a weekend and I'm going then,
Right.
but my daytime sitting in my office, I might have an hour or two free. So he has been really supportive in that regard. In the opposite regard, whenever he and I have a conversation about things, he does kind of always turn it on himself. We kind of always have the conversation of, well, I don't know what I would ever do with a doctorate, and I don't know what I would do having a dissertation. And so sometimes that support seems negated by it being turned on himself.
All right, now what about your coworkers? Do you consider them to be part of your support system? Why or why not?
For sure. Quite frankly, right now, all of my coworkers and I are in continuing education. I'm getting my doctorate. One of my coworkers is getting his MBA, and my other coworker just started her Master's of Higher Education. And so we are all in the same boat right now. We're all kind of studying, and so we do bounce a lot of stuff off of each other. In that same regard, one of my coworkers is a little bit of a know-it-all. And so anytime we discuss a topic that he seems to think he knows about, sometimes it does end up to be a little bit of a fighting match, if you will, about, who knows what better, or who's learning what better, or, all of that. He had a leadership class the semester before us. And so it was very, well, I know this about leadership, and I know that about leadership. And so it did kind of tend to be a little bit of a contention about who was learning what better.
It felt less supportive than...
Yeah, I don't want to say it felt less supportive. It just definitely felt like a competition.
Okay. All right, now what about your classmates and your cohort mates? How do you perceive them in regard to your support system? And are there relationships with individual classmates or cohort mates versus the collective that, compare in a different way?
Well, one of them's sitting right next to me. And that's one thing that's been so great about our relationship is we really do keep each other on task, on time. We're constantly asking each other where we're at on certain projects or items, and so that's been an amazing support. We've also created both a cohort Facebook group and a MTSU professionals attending ETSU Facebook group, and they've been very supportive as well. Sort of with the whole deadlines thing, or talking about, what do I need to be doing here? When do I need to be doing that? So it has been a really good support system. I think that sometimes it maybe gets us a little confused. Yeah. Sometimes when we do use those online formats as to, oh my gosh, should I be doing this if somebody's working ahead or a little bit, or maybe even sometimes that little bit of competition again too.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, what about your friends? How do you perceive them in regard to your support system? Do they understand your challenges if they're not in graduate school and seek to help with them, or do they just add to your stress level because they're pulling at you?
Well, I don't have very many friends. And my friends that I do have, we are all in these programs. You and I are in this program together, and my two colleagues are in this program. I do have some acquaintances who are always very supportive. If I post something on Facebook like, hey, I'm reading this about that, they're always like, way to go. Or, if I post about grades. And then same thing about if I see them, they're like, how's classes going? When is your semester? So they are very in tune with there's something else going on with my life. And they've known that I'm not hanging out as much. I'm not just, here, there, willy-nilly anymore, because I can't be. I mean, it's a very big commitment for me to do the amount of work we have to do. I can't be, going to movies every Friday night type of a thing.
Right. And do you foresee yourself sort of reigniting those relationships once we're past this program, or do you think some of those relationships will just kind of just go away?
It'll really depend. I'm looking forward at my career and what I'm going to do come that time in my life, and there's always the possibility I may have to change locations if there's nothing here for me to move up to. And so unfortunately then you do lose those connections, because unfortunately in higher education you do have to a lot of times move out to move up,
right?
And that does mean leaving your friends behind. So hopefully if I stay around I can definitely rekindle those friendships.
All right, so how would you characterize your professors and or your advisor in terms of, again, that support system, and how do those relationships affect your stress level?
Yeah, I think we've had a very tiered effect from our professors and the advisors in our cohort. Some professors have been so on top of things, daily, weekly emails or videos. Some of our professors have been less communicative, and some of our professors have been not at all communicative. And so that when we don't have that communication from our professors and our advisors, that does add to my personal stress level, and I'm sure it does to others in our cohort. Just because you don't know where you're at, you don't know what your grades are, you don't know what they're looking for if they're not as indicative in their syllabus about what they want. And so sometimes that is a little bit of an added stress because you're not quite sure that you're doing things right. And, especially for those of us who it's been a long time, if any, online classes, if we're not quite sure where we're going and what we're doing, that sort of hands-off approach has been a big stressor.
Great, yes. So, Megan, with all that we've discussed and all the different support systems, what comparisons and contrasts can you make in terms of the different members of your personal support system? Do some of them, for example, feel more reliable than others? Do some affect your stress level in a positive way or a negative way more than others?
Sure. I think those of you, and I'm going to lump that you in with them, who are in class right now, very reliable, very helpful. For you and I, we're in the same program, so we can bounce a lot of things off of each other. But even my colleagues who are in other programs, we were helping our newest person who's starting school with D2L and Zotero and all that kind of stuff. And so that's been really great because we can all rely on each other then to help us with the technology or the nuances we're not getting. Again, my mom has been the biggest cheerleader, and while yes, she's a personal and time stressor on me, she's very proud of me. When I was growing up, it was, why can't you be more like your cousins? Because I have some cousins who literally their IQs are off the charts, and mine has never been. Yeah. And I put in the amount of work I've needed to in order to do well, but I've not gone above and beyond. Well, unfortunately, those family members never made it past their freshman year of college, and here I am getting my doctorate. And so she's very proud of me. She says she's very proud of me, so that's helpful. Like I said, though, my supervisor, when it all kind of gets turned back on himself, that tends to be a little bit of a stressor of, why when we talk about it is everything about him. And I'm sure it's an insecurity and whatnot, but just because I'm in a class doesn't mean he has to be in a class. Just because I'm looking at things to do with my dissertation doesn't mean he do. To me, it's not a competition.
Right.
And so when it gets turned back on him, it feels like he's placing it in a competition league.
Right. So do you feel that you are lacking any sort of a support system that would have a positive effect on your stress level from the doctoral program?
I think one thing that's very hard is as a single female, I am paying for my own home. I am mowing my own lawn. I am doing my own dishes and my own laundry. And while a lot of other single women are doing that too, sometimes it's very hard to find the time. And as the only monetary winner in my home, because let me tell you, my cat doesn't make any money.
He doesn't contribute?
Nope. My mom says all the time, why don't I pay somebody to mow my lawn, and why don't I pay somebody to clean my house and stuff? And I just don't have that ability because I'm literally making ends meet in an expensive area to live in, and owning my own home, which is a feat in itself for a single person in this area. But I did well prior to this job saving money because I lived in as well with my last position. So I did save a lot of money, but I probably did overextend myself a little bit buying a home. I did not want to live in a 400 square foot apartment anymore. So, but now I have, 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms to take care of and a lawn, and should it snow or ice, that kind of thing. And so that's a little bit of a stressor, is being the only person in my home taking care of my home.
Well, that's all the formal questions that I have for you. Do you have any final thoughts on anything we've discussed today, or are there questions that I can answer for you?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think this was a very well-rounded list of stress, people who can help you, and then activities of what makes you stressful.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate, again, you speaking with me today. And I'll just make sure that I have your contact information so that I can follow up with you if I need any clarification when transcribing our interview. And I'll give you my contact information as well. But again, thank you. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Have a good day.